The recording played in silence. Ambassador Jaron sat alone in his quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel, Harmony's light watching footage he had seen 100 times before but could never escape. The holographic display cast blue light across his face as the planet Velcor rotated slowly in the projection field before him. It had been beautiful once. Velcor, a world of crimson forests and silver oceans home to the Velcarii people. Pacifists, poets, dreamers who had greeted the stars with open arms and songs of welcome. The Draconis Empire had answered those songs with plasma fire. Jaren's hand trembled as he advanced the playback. The orbital bombardment began at timestamp 041733. Lances of superheated energy stabbed down through Velcor's atmosphere like the fingers of an angry god. Continents cracked. Oceans boiled away in great plumes of steam. The crimson forests ignited in a firestorm that consumed entire hemispheres in hours. By timestamp 094209, there was nothing left but ash and cooling magma. 3 billion Velcarii, gone. Their crime had been refusing to surrender their world, their resources, their freedom to an empire built on the broken backs of the conquered. Jaren had been the herd-bearer, not on Velcor itself, but close enough. Close enough to receive the final desperate transmissions. Close enough to hear the screams cut short as the atmosphere burned away. Close enough to do absolutely nothing while the Draconis fleet reduced an entire civilization to geological memory. The Altari Federation, his people had filed a formal protest with the Galactic Council, a strongly worded condemnation. Economic sanctions that lasted exactly 3 months before trade resumed because the galaxy ran on Draconis-controlled shipping lanes. Velcor was 12 years ago. The Draconis Empire had conquered 11 other worlds since then. Jaren closed the recording and stood his blue skin pale in the dim lighting of his quarters. He was 52 years old. He had served the Altari Federation as a diplomat for 30 years. He had negotiated 17 peaceful settlements, prevented 4 wars, and built bridges between species that had never before spoken to one another. None of it mattered now, because 8 months ago his exploration fleet had discovered a world called Earth. And now the Draconis Empire was coming for it. The conference chamber of the Galactic Council hung suspended in the void between stars, a massive ring-shaped station that had served as neutral ground for diplomatic cooperation spanning over 2 centuries. Its corridors were engineering marvels, gravity generators creating comfortable environments for species ranging from methane breathers to lithium-based crystalline entities. But today, only the main assembly hall mattered. Jaren walked through corridors lined with representatives from 47 different civilizations, each one called here on emergency protocol. The Altari rarely invoked emergency sessions. His people preferred quiet diplomacy, patient negotiation, the slow work of building consensus across cultural divides that could span millions of years of evolutionary separation. That reputation was why they were listening now. Some of them, anyway. The assembly hall was a hemisphere of translucent crystal that looked out onto the stars themselves. Tiered seating rose in concentric rings around a central platform, each section designed to accommodate the unique needs of its inhabitants. The methane breathers occupied sealed pods. The crystallines rested on specially tuned resonance platforms. The bipeds, quadrupeds, and more exotic forms settled into spaces that had been negotiated over decades of careful protocol. Jaren descended the central aisle toward the speaker's platform, aware of every eye optical sensor and electromagnetic perception field tracking his movement. The murmur of translation devices filled the air with a constant low hum, turning thoughts and chemical signals and quantum states into mutually comprehensible language. Ambassador Threll of the consortium caught his arm as he passed. The insectoid diplomat's compound eyes glittered with concern. "Are you certain about this, Jaren? The Draconis delegation is already furious that you called an emergency session. If your evidence is not compelling—" "It is compelling," Jaren said quietly. "The question is whether anyone will believe it matters." He continued to the platform. The speaking circle activated beneath his feet amplification fields, carrying his voice to every corner of the vast chamber. 47 civilizations watched him, waited. Jaren thought of Velcor burning. "Fellow members of the Galactic Council," he began, "I come before you today with urgent news that affects the security and stability of every species represented in this chamber." He gestured and the holographic display materialized above the platform. A blue and green world rotated slowly in the projection field. Oceans, continents, white clouds swirling in atmospheric patterns. It could have been any of 1,000 inhabited worlds. 8 months ago, an Altari deep space exploration fleet discovered this planet in the outer spiral arm sector, designated Tau 97. The inhabitants call it Earth. They call themselves humans. A ripple of interest moved through the assembly. New species were always noteworthy. In a galaxy of trillions of stars, intelligent life remained precious and rare. First contact protocols existed for good reason. The addition of a new voice to the galactic community was cause for celebration. Jaren felt no celebration, only the cold weight of certainty settling in his chest. Initial scans suggested a species in the early stages of spaceflight capability. He continued, chemical rockets, primitive fusion drives, small colonies on their moon and inner system bodies. By all standard metrics, humanity appeared to be a developing civilization approximately 2 to 3 centuries away from achieving practical faster-than-light travel. He paused, letting the assembled representatives absorb that classification. Developing civilizations fell under Council protection protocols. Contact was permitted, but conquest was forbidden until a species achieved independent FTL capability and could defend its sovereign space. However, Jaren said, his voice hardening, during our cultural exchange mission, we discovered something that contradicts this classification. Something that makes humanity unique among all known intelligent species. The holographic display changed. Images of human history flickered through the projection field. Stone tools, bronze weapons, iron swords, gunpowder cannons, automatic rifles, nuclear missiles. Each image remained visible for exactly 3 seconds before transitioning to the next, a cascade of technological advancement, all focused on a single purpose: war. Humanity has been engaged in continuous warfare for their entire recorded history, Jaren stated, 5,000 years without a single decade of complete global peace. They have fought with every material and every method available to them. They have weaponized stone metal chemistry, biology, and nuclear physics. They have turned their own atmosphere, their own biology, their own genetic code into instruments of destruction. Some of the assembled representatives leaned forward with interest. Others shifted uncomfortably. The Valkyrie had been pacifists. Most civilizations went through violent phases during their evolutionary development, but eventually found peace through exhaustion, mutual cooperation, or technological transcendence. Humans apparently had never stopped. But this is not what concerns me most, Jaren continued. The holographic display shifted again, showing images of massive stone buildings, their architecture deliberately imposing. These are human military academies, educational institutions dedicated entirely to the study of warfare, not the prevention of war, not the history of conflicts, the perfection of war itself. More images, libraries filled with ancient texts, simulation chambers where young humans practice tactics, command centers where officers analyze battles that had occurred thousands of years ago, learning from victories and defeats alike. Humans do not study war to avoid it, Jaren said quietly. They study war to master it. They maintain academies that have existed for centuries, teaching strategies written before most species in this chamber achieve spaceflight. They analyze every engagement they have ever fought, creating detailed records of what succeeded and what failed. They run simulations of battles that never occurred, exploring theoretical scenarios to expand their tactical knowledge. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. They have turned warfare into mathematics, into science, into an art form refined across millennia. The murmur of translation devices grew louder as representatives began to discuss among themselves. Jaren could sense the shift in the chamber's mood, curiosity giving way to unease. Then the Draconis delegation stood. General Corvin rose from the crimson-marked section reserved for the Draconis Empire. The massive reptilian warrior towered over most other beings in the chamber, his red scales catching the light from the crystal dome above. Scars crisscrossed his face and arms, each one a badge of honor from 62 years of military service. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like grinding stone. Ambassador Jaren, with respect, your people see threats in shadows and danger in dust. You present us with images of a primitive species that fights with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Yes, they have a violent history. So did the Draconis before we achieved civilization through strength and unity. So did half the species in this chamber. Corvin gestured at the holographic display, his clawed hand dismissing the images of human war colleges. You show us schools where they study old battles. We Draconis maintain war museums where our children learn the glories of conquest. You show us weapons. We possess plasma cannons that can melt through starship hulls. You show us their tiny colonies on a single moon. The general's yellow eyes fixed on Jaren with predatory intensity. We control 50 star systems. We field the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. We have conquered species far more advanced than these humans. What exactly should concern us about a species still using chemical rockets to leave their own atmosphere? Laughter rippled through the Draconis section. Other representatives joined in, though more quietly. The Altari reputation for caution was well known. Some called it wisdom. Others called it cowardice. Jaren had expected this. He had prepared for it. General Corvin, you are correct that by conventional metrics, humanity poses no immediate military threat to the Draconis Empire. Their technology is indeed inferior by comparison. Their industrial capacity is limited to a single star system. By standard assessment protocols, they should be easily conquered. He paused, making sure he had the general's full attention. But I am not here to discuss conventional warfare. I am here to warn you about what makes humanity fundamentally different from every other species the Draconis Empire has encountered. Jaren gestured and the holographic display changed one final time. An elderly human male appeared seated in a simple chair in what looked like a teaching environment. The man's hair was white, his face lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and alert. This is Professor Malcolm Sterling, age 73, director of Earth's Combined Strategic Studies Institute. During our cultural exchange, I asked him a hypothetical question. I asked what humanity would do if a hostile force attacked their world. The holographic recording began to play. Professor Sterling's voice was calm, almost conversational, with the easy confidence of someone who had spent decades teaching young minds. If someone attacked Earth, well, Ambassador, that's an interesting question. I suppose we defend ourselves naturally. But not just defend. Defense implies waiting for the enemy to tire themselves out against our fortifications. That's not how humans fight when survival is at stake. The professor leaned forward slightly, his expression never changing. We'd study them, learn every weakness, every pattern, every psychological vulnerability. We'd hit their supply lines, disrupt their communications, turn their own soldiers against them through propaganda or incentive. We'd make every meter of space they occupy cost them blood and resources. And when they finally retreated exhausted and demoralized, we wouldn't let them leave. Sterling smiled. It was not a warm expression. We'd follow them home, dismantle their infrastructure piece by piece. Not through mass destruction, mind you. Humanity learned the futility of total war centuries ago. No, we'd be surgical, precise. We'd remove their capacity to threaten us ever again while leaving their civilian population intact. Then we'd help them rebuild, teach them better ways, integrate them into a framework where attacking Earth would be unthinkable. The recording paused on that smile. Jaren let the silence stretch for a long moment before speaking again. This honored representatives is what concerns me. Not their current technology, not their industrial capacity, their mindset. Humanity does not fight to win battles. They fight to ensure the war can never be repeated. They do not seek revenge. They seek permanent solutions. And they smile when they talk about it. The chamber had gone very quiet. I am not suggesting humanity poses an immediate threat to galactic stability, Jaren continued. I am warning that any civilization that chooses to attack them is making a mistake from which they may not recover. The Draconis Empire has conquered 50 worlds. I believe humanity would ensure it conquered no more. General Corvin stood silent for a moment, his scaled face unreadable. Then he sat down without another word. But in the crimson marked section reserved for the Draconis delegation, Jaren saw other figures leaning together in conversation, saw yellow eyes gleaming with something that looked less like caution and more like opportunity. 3 days later, Jaren's worst fears were confirmed. The official Draconis response came through diplomatic channels, formal and cold. The Draconis Empire acknowledges the Altari Federation's concerns regarding the species known as humanity. However, as Earth is located outside Council-protected space and humanity has not yet achieved independent FTL capability, they fall outside protection protocols. The Empire reserves the right to expand into unclaimed territories as permitted under Galactic Charter Section 7 subsection 4. Jaren read the message 3 times, then immediately requested emergency communication with Earth. The Ansible connection took 6 hours to establish across the light years separating the Council station from Earth's solar system. When the holographic link finally stabilized, Jaren found himself looking at Director Miriam Ashford. She was 67 years old with white hair, cut short in a practical style, and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a simple gray uniform with minimal insignia, and she sat in an office that could have belonged to any administrator anywhere in the galaxy. Functional, austere, giving away absolutely nothing about the person who occupied it. Ambassador Jaren, she said, her voice carrying easily across the Ansible connection despite the distance. We received your warning about the Draconus Empire's intentions. We appreciate the risk you took in sending it. Director Ashford, you need to understand what you're facing. The Draconus military has never lost a war. They field technology centuries ahead of what your species currently possesses. Their standard battle doctrine involves overwhelming force followed by total subjugation. If they decide to attack Earth, they already have decided, Ashford interrupted gently. We've been tracking their fleet movements for the past 72 hours. 300 warships, conventional conquest formation. They'll arrive at the edge of our solar system in approximately 9 days. Jaren felt his hearts, both of them, skip a beat. Then you must evacuate immediately. The Council can provide refugee ships, establish colonies for your people on protected worlds. It would take years, but we're not evacuating, Ambassador. The simple certainty in her voice stopped him cold. Director Ashford, I have seen what the Draconus Empire does to civilizations that resist. I have watched entire worlds burn. Your people cannot possibly defend against a force of that magnitude with your current technology. Ashford smiled. It was a small expression, barely there, but it reminded Jaren uncomfortably of Professor Sterling's smile in the recording he had shown the Council. Ambassador, I'd like to show you something. Do you have time for a brief tour? The question was so unexpected that Jaren could only nod. The holographic view shifted as Ashford stood and began walking. The Ansible connection followed her movement, showing Jaren glimpses of the facility she occupied. Long corridors lined with blast doors, security checkpoints with armed guards, massive elevators descending deep underground. They emerged into a space that made Jaren's breath catch in his throat. It was enormous. A cavern that must have been excavated from solid bedrock, stretching away into the distance, farther than the holographic connection could clearly show. But it wasn't the size that shocked him. It was what the cavern contained. Walls, floor to ceiling, stretching away in every direction, covered with displays. Holographic screens, physical documents sealed behind environmental shields, three-dimensional tactical maps, ship schematics, battle simulations, personnel files, and every single piece of information was about the Draconus Empire. Ashford walked slowly through the archive, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Jaren's holographic perspective followed, showing him glimpses of what humanity had collected. Fleet compositions dating back 2 centuries. Complete technical specifications for Draconus plasma cannons, shield generators faster than light drives. Psychological profiles of every major military commander. Economic data on resource extraction from conquered worlds. Communication protocols. Supply chain logistics. Tactical doctrines analyzed in excruciating detail. We detected the first Draconus radio transmission in the year 2029 of our calendar, Ashford said quietly, her voice echoing slightly in the enormous chamber. That was 218 years ago. We didn't have faster-than-light capability then. We didn't have energy shields or plasma weapons. But we had radio telescopes, we had computers, we had patience. She stopped in front of a display showing the complete organizational structure of the Draconus military. For 218 years, we have been listening, watching, learning. Every battle the Draconus Empire has fought, we have studied. Every tactic they have employed, we have analyzed. Every weakness they have displayed, we have cataloged. Jaren stared at the display, his mind struggling to process the implications. When the Altari Federation made first contact with the Draconis 50 years ago, you showed them your ships, your technology, your culture. You were open, trusting. Within 5 years, they had conquered two of your colony worlds because they understood exactly how you thought, how you fought, how you could be defeated. Ashford turned to face the holographic connection directly, her expression calm. We learned from your mistake, Ambassador. When you Altari discovered Earth 8 months ago, we welcomed you. We shared our culture, our art, our philosophy. We gave you tours of our military academies because we wanted you to understand that we take warfare seriously. But we never showed you this. She gestured at the walls of intelligence surrounding them. This is what the Draconis Empire doesn't know exists. This is what they cannot imagine a primitive species being capable of creating. And this is why when their fleet arrives in 9 days, they're going to discover that they made a terrible mistake. But your technology, Jaren began, is better than they think, Ashford said simply. 187 years ago, a Draconis survey probe suffered a malfunction and crashed on Mars. We recovered it. We spent the next century reverse engineering every component. Their plasma weapons, their energy shields, their faster-than-light engines. We didn't just copy them, Ambassador. We improved them. She walked to another section of the archive where Jaren could see personnel files scrolling past. Hundreds of them. Thousands. We've also been preparing our people, Ashford continued. Every human who serves in our defense force knows exactly what they're fighting for and exactly what they're fighting against. The holographic display focused on one file. A young woman, dark hair, intense eyes. The name read Lieutenant Sophia Reyes, 26 Fighter Squadron Commander. This is Lieutenant Reyes, Ashford said quietly. 3 months ago, her brother was killed when an unidentified probe entered our system and fired on a civilian transport before self-destructing. We didn't know whose probe it was at the time. Now we do. The display shifted to show another file. An older woman, gray hair pulled back severely. The name Dr. Keiko Tanaka, 45 Weapons Development Director. Dr. Tanaka designed the mass driver systems that will be protecting Earth. Ashford continued, she's also the one who insisted on building them with precise targeting capabilities rather than area effect weapons. She believes that even in war, we must choose our violence carefully. Ashford looked directly at Jaren through the holographic connection. The Draconis see 37 cargo vessels in orbit around Earth because that's what we want them to see. They see chemical rockets because we've been very careful to only use that technology where their surveillance can detect it. They see a species 2 to 3 centuries away from matching their capabilities. Her expression hardened. They're wrong by approximately 200 years. Jaren felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature in his quarters. He was looking at something the galaxy had never seen before. Not just military preparation, not just technological advancement. Strategic patience refined to an art form. You've been preparing for this war for over 2 centuries, he said slowly. Preparing for an enemy you had never met. An enemy that might never have noticed you existed. Hope for the best, Ashford replied. Prepare for the worst. It's an old human saying, Ambassador. We hoped the galaxy would leave us in peace, but we prepared for the day someone decided we were too weak to resist conquest. She walked back toward the entrance, the holographic connection following her movement through the vast archive of intelligence. The Draconis Empire has conquered 50 worlds. Every single one of those conquests followed the same pattern. Overwhelming force, rapid subjugation, total control. They've been using the same tactics for 300 years because those tactics have never failed them. Ashford paused at the entrance to the archive, looking back at the walls of data. They're predictable, Ambassador. And predictability in warfare is a fatal weakness. The connection began to fade as Ashford returned to her office. Before it cut out entirely, she spoke one last time. Thank you for the warning, Ambassador Jaren. Thank you for trying to save us when the Council wouldn't act. I want you to know that we heard you. We believed you, and we're ready. The holographic display went dark. Jaren sat in silence for a long time, staring at the space where Ashford's image had been. He thought about Lieutenant Reyes, who had lost her brother to Draconis aggression. About Dr. Tanaka, who built weapons of precision rather than mass destruction. About 218 years of patient, careful preparation. He thought about Velcor burning, about the 12 other worlds the Draconis had conquered, about civilizations that had resisted and been crushed beneath overwhelming military force. But those civilizations had been discovered suddenly, contacted openly, given weeks or months to prepare for an invasion they didn't understand and couldn't predict. Humanity had been given 218 years, and they had used every single day. Jaren stood and walked to the small viewport in his quarters. Outside, the stars turned slowly in the eternal dance of the galaxy. Somewhere among those stars, the Draconis fleet was accelerating toward Earth, confident in their power, certain of their victory. They thought they were hunting prey. Jaren suspected they had no idea they had become the prey themselves. But there was something else. Something Ashford hadn't said, but Jaren had understood from the personnel files he'd glimpsed. Humanity wasn't just preparing weapons and tactics. They were preparing people. Individuals with stories, with motivations, with reasons to fight that went beyond simple survival. Lieutenant Reyes wanted revenge for her brother, Dr. Tanaka wanted to prove that violence could be controlled, measured, used only when necessary. And there were others, thousands of others, each one with their own reason to stand against the Draconis Empire. That Jaren realized was what made humanity truly dangerous. Not their technology, not their tactics. The fact that every single one of them understood exactly why they were fighting. And more importantly, what they were fighting for. The emergency council session convened 6 days later. Jaren had requested it through official channels, following every protocol, knowing it would be ignored until it was too late. The council moved slowly by design. Careful deliberation, they called it. Bureaucratic paralysis, others whispered. By the time the representatives gathered in the Crystal Assembly Hall, the Draconis fleet was less than 72 hours from reaching Earth. Jaren stood at the speaker's platform once more, looking up at the tiered seating filled with 47 civilizations. The Draconis section was notably sparse. Most of their delegation had departed for their homeworld to witness the conquest. Only a skeleton crew remained to observe council proceedings and file formal annexation claims once Earth fell. Honored representatives, Jaren began, I stand before you one final time to plead for intervention in the Draconis Empire's planned attack on Earth. Under Galactic Charter Section 12, the Council has the authority to intervene in conflicts that threaten regional stability. Ambassador Jaren Opan interrupted Councillor Vreth of the Trade Consortium, his voice carrying the mechanical precision of a translated thought. We have reviewed your previous presentation regarding humanity. While their martial culture is indeed noteworthy, the facts remain unchanged. Earth is not a council member world. Humanity has not achieved independent, faster-than-light capability. The Draconis Empire is operating within established territorial expansion guidelines. Established guidelines that have resulted in 50 conquered worlds, Jaren shot back. Established guidelines that permit genocide if the victims haven't developed the right technology fast enough. A murmur ran through the assembly. Direct accusations were rare in council chambers. Jaren didn't care anymore. I have evidence, he continued, that humanity is more advanced than they appear, that this conflict may not proceed as the Draconis expect. Evidence provided by the humans themselves, interrupted another counselor. Ambassador, you have made clear your admiration for this species, but we cannot base galactic policy on speculation and defensive propaganda from a civilization facing conquest. Jaren felt the moment slipping away, felt the weight of bureaucratic inertia crushing any chance of intervention. Then General Corvin stood. The Draconis representative looked older than he had at the previous session, tired. He didn't speak immediately, just stood there in the crimson-marked section, his scarred face unreadable. Ambassador Jaren, he said finally, his voice quieter than before, you have served your federation honorably for 3 decades. You have a reputation for wisdom and caution. So I will ask you directly, do you truly believe humanity poses a threat to the Draconis Empire? Every eye in the chamber turned to Jaren. The translation devices hummed with anticipation. Jaren thought about Director Ashford standing in that vast archive, about 218 years of patient observation, about Lieutenant Reyes and her brother, about Dr. Tanaka building weapons that chose precision over devastation, about Professor Sterling's calm smile when discussing how humanity would dismantle an enemy's entire civilization. General Corvin, he said slowly, I believe humanity poses a threat to anyone who underestimates them. I believe your empire is about to learn a lesson it has never had to learn before. And I believe that lesson will be taught at a terrible cost to your people." Corbin held his gaze for a long moment. Then the general nodded once sharply and sat down. The council voted, 31 to 16 against intervention with the Altari Federation and a handful of other minor powers dissenting. Earth would face the Draconis Empire alone. Jaren returned to his quarters and composed a message. It was short. It was encrypted using the Ansible codes Director Ashford had provided during their last conversation. And it said only 3 words: "They are coming." The response arrived 18 minutes later. "We know." But this time there was more. A second message, also encrypted with Altari navigation codes embedded in the transmission header. Jaren's communications officer flagged it immediately. "Ambassador, there's something strange about this second transmission. It's using our own beacon frequencies, but the source location doesn't match Earth's position." Jaren pulled up the navigation data and felt his heart stop. The transmission wasn't coming from Earth. It was bouncing through a relay network. A network of small Altari communications satellites that had been deployed throughout this sector over the past 8 months during routine scientific observation missions. Satellites that Jaren himself had authorized the deployment of. Satellites that humanity had apparently modified to serve as signal boosters, allowing them to track Draconis fleet movements from thousands of light years away. "Ambassador," his communications officer asked, "should I report this to the council? The humans have compromised our—" "No," Jaren said quietly. "We haven't been compromised. We've been complicit." He understood now. The extra time his exploration fleet had spent in Earth's system. The technical difficulties that had required assistance from human engineers. The cultural exchange that had involved unprecedented access to Altari communication protocols. The humans hadn't hacked Altari systems. Jaren's own people had helped them knowingly or not create an intelligence network spanning half the spiral arm. And Jaren, when he had authorized those satellite deployments, had suspected, had known on some level what the humans might do with that access. He had helped them anyway, because deep down beneath 30 years of diplomatic protocol and careful neutrality, Jaren had wanted someone to stand up to the Draconis Empire, had wanted someone to prove that conquest wasn't inevitable. That power could be challenged. He had just never imagined it would be a species the galaxy considered primitive. "Sir," his communications officer prompted. Jaren deleted the navigation data from the ship's logs. "It's nothing, a transmission echo. Disregard it." He sat in the darkness of his quarters watching the stars and waited for the galaxy to change. 3 days later, long-range sensors detected the Draconis fleet dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. 300 warships, the largest invasion force the Empire had deployed in over a decade. Enough firepower to reduce a dozen worlds to ash. Jaren immediately requested permission to observe the conflict from a safe distance. His official justification was scholarly interest in first contact protocols and conflict resolution. His actual reason was simpler: he needed to witness this. Needed to know if humanity's confidence was justified or if he was about to watch another Velcor. The council granted permission. After all, what harm could one Altari observer do Jaren's ship? Harmony's light engaged its own faster-than-light drive and jumped toward Earth's coordinates. The journey would take 6 hours. By the time he arrived, the first engagement would likely be over. He spent those 6 hours reviewing everything he knew about both civilizations. The Draconis Empire with its 300-year history of systematic conquest. Humanity with its 5,000-year history of systematic warfare. Overwhelming force versus overwhelming preparation. Superior technology versus superior intelligence. An empire that had never lost versus a species that had spent 2 centuries ensuring it never would. When Harmony's light dropped back into normal space at the designated observation coordinates far beyond the effective range of any weapons, but close enough for his sensors to track the battle, Jaren's first officer immediately called him to the bridge. "Ambassador, you need to see this." Jaren arrived to find his entire crew staring at the tactical display in stunned silence. The Draconis fleet was there. 300 ships arranged in their standard conquest formation. Heavy battleships at the front, their plasma cannons already charging. Support cruisers providing defensive coverage. Troop carriers hanging back, waiting for the orbital bombardment to clear any resistance. And there moving to intercept them were the human ships. 37 vessels. exactly as the Draconis intelligence had reported. They looked like converted cargo haulers, civilian craft pressed into emergency military service. Small, fragile, hopelessly outmatched. Jaren's tactical officer was running threat assessments, and the computer's conclusion was unequivocal. Human defeat probability, 99.7%. Estimated time to total destruction, 43 minutes. But something was wrong. The human ships weren't retreating. They weren't scattering. They weren't even trying to hide. They were advancing. 37 vessels against 300 accelerating toward the Draconis fleet in a formation so precise it looked like a single organism moving through the void. And leading them in a fighter craft that looked impossibly small against the massive Draconis battleships was a young woman whose brother had died 3 months ago for the crime of being in the wrong place when Draconis decided to test their weapons. Lieutenant Sophia Reyes checked her instruments one final time, her hands steady on the controls despite the terror and rage that warred inside her chest. All fighters, this is Reyes. Stay in formation. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. She thought about Marcus, about his laugh, about the last message he'd sent her from that civilian transport, complaining about the long journey to the mining colonies, but excited about the work waiting there. About the way that message had cut off mid-sentence when the Draconis probe had opened fire. They think we're prey, Sophia said into the comm. Let's teach them about humans who've been preparing their whole lives for this moment. Jaren watched his tactical display, watched the distance close, and realized his hands were shaking. The Draconis were about to discover what 218 years of preparation looked like. And somewhere on Earth, director Miriam Ashford was probably smiling. The first shot would be fired in less than 4 minutes. Jaren leaned forward in his command chair and gave an order he had never given before in 30 years of diplomatic service. Battle stations, record everything. The tactical display on Harmony's light painted the void in geometric precision. Blue icons for human ships, red for Draconis. The distance between them measured in kilometers that shrank with each passing second. Jaren's first officer, Lieutenant Mikra, stood at the sensor station with her 6 fingers dancing across holographic controls. Her species, the Thelani, possessed perception ranges far beyond what most humanoids could detect. Right now, her eye stalks were fully extended tracking details that Jaren's own vision would miss. Ambassador, she said quietly, the Draconis flagship is initiating a wideband transmission. Shall I put it through? The communication crackled to life. Admiral Zalthor's voice filled the bridge of Harmony's light, arrogant and assured. He wasn't even bothering to encrypt. Why would he? The battle was already won in his mind. All vessels, this is Admiral Zalthor, commanding the 1st Conquest Fleet. Sensor confirmation, 37 hostile craft detected. Vessels appear to be converted civilian cargo haulers. No energy signatures consistent with military-grade weapons systems. No shield emissions detected. A pause. Then unmistakably, Zalthor laughed. This will be over within the hour. Battle groups 3 through 7 maintain formation. Let them come to us. I want to see how close they get before they realize their mistake. More laughter from the Draconis bridge crew transmitted across the fleet. Jaren heard the confidence in those voices. The certainty. These were warriors who had conquered 50 worlds. Warriors who had never known defeat. Jaren's own tactical officer, a young Altari named Persian, looked up from his console with barely concealed horror. Ambassador, the humans are still accelerating. They're not even attempting evasive maneuvers. It's like they're committing suicide. Jaren said nothing. He remembered Director Ashford standing in that vast archive. Lieutenant Reyes, who had a brother to avenge. Dr. Tanaka, who had spent years building weapons that chose precision over devastation. 218 years of preparation. That kind of patience didn't end in suicide charges. Distance to engagement range, he asked quietly. 400,000 kilometers and closing. The Draconis will achieve firing solution in approximately 90 seconds. Jaren leaned back in his command chair. His hearts, both of them, were beating too fast. He had watched civilizations die before, had witnessed the terrible efficiency of Draconis plasma fire reducing cities to molten slag. But always the victims had tried to run, had scattered, had begged for mercy. These humans were doing none of those things. They were advancing like they had already won. Inside her fighter cockpit, Sophia Reyes watched the distance counter tick down and forced herself to breathe. In, out, in, out. The way they'd taught her in training. The way Marcus used to remind her when she got anxious before competitions. Marcus who would never breathe again. Flight Alpha sound off, she said into the comm, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. Alpha 2 ready. Alpha 3 ready. Alpha 4 ready. 12 voices, 12 pilots. Some of them had families. Some had lovers. Some, like her, had ghosts riding in their cockpits. All of them had trained for this moment their entire adult lives. Remember, Sophia said, they don't know what we are. They don't know what we can do. They think we're prey. She paused, thinking of Marcus's smile. Show them what happens when humans hunt. The distance collapsed. 300,000 kilometers. 200,000. The Draconis battleships began to adjust their formation plasma cannons, charging with the familiar whine of weapons built to crack planets. Sophia's targeting computer chimed. Lock acquired. The Draconis flagship, massive and arrogant, sitting in the center of their formation like it owned the void. 100,000 kilometers. Zalthor's voice came through again, no longer laughing. All business now. All forward batteries acquire targets. Fire on my mark. 50,000 kilometers. Mark. Space erupted in light. 23 Draconis battleships fired simultaneously. Lances of superheated plasma stabbed across the void, each beam carrying enough energy to vaporize a small moon. The weapons were accurate to within meters at this range. There was no dodge, no escape. The laws of physics made evasion impossible once the plasma was discharged. Jaren watched the display, watched those beams reach out toward the human fleet, and felt something inside him break. He had tried to warn them, had risked his career, his reputation, everything till the beam struck, and the human ships absorbed them. For exactly 2.7 seconds, there was absolute silence on Harmony's Lights Bridge. Every member of Jaren's crew stared at the tactical display in shock so profound it bordered on religious experience. The human vessels glowed white-hot where the plasma had made contact. Their hulls radiated heat in wavelengths that should have meant catastrophic structural failure. But the ships didn't explode, didn't fragment, didn't even slow down. They just kept coming. Sophia felt her ship shudder as the plasma washed over her shields. The heat indicators spiked red, then amber, then green as Dr. Tanaka's heat channeling system did exactly what it was designed to do. Absorbed the energy, redistributed it through radiator arrays built into the hull, turned a killing blow into nothing more than a temperature increase. All ship status report, she called out. Alpha Squadron, no damage. Beta Squadron shields at 92%. Gamma Squadron, all systems nominal. Delta Squadron ready to engage. Sophia allowed herself a small smile. Dr. Tanaka had been right. The Draconis had been using the same plasma weapon design for 300 years. Humanity had spent 187 years learning how to counter it. All fighters, she said, weapons free, target propulsion and weapon systems only, no reactor strikes unless authorized. We're here to disable, not slaughter. She armed her mass driver and selected her target. A Draconis heavy cruiser, shields down, completely unprepared for what came next. Fire! Jaren didn't see the weapons activate. There was no visible charge up, no obvious gun ports opening, no telltale energy signature building before discharge. One moment the human ships were advancing through plasma fire. The next moment, invisible projectiles were crossing the space between the fleets at velocities that made Jaren's instruments scream warnings. The tactical computer identified them in microseconds, kinetic impactors. Dense metal projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds. Ancient technology, primitive by galactic standards, rendered obsolete centuries ago by energy weapons that could course-correct mid-flight and didn't rely on ammunition. Except these projectiles were moving at 0.4% of light speed. At those velocities, mass stopped mattering. Kinetic energy became everything. And 2 tons of tungsten carbide moving at 1,200 kilometers per second carried more destructive force than most fusion warheads. The first round punched through the bow armor of a Draconis heavy cruiser like it was tissue paper, passed through 17 interior decks, exited through the stern, kept going and hit a destroyer positioned 3,000 kilometers behind the cruiser. Destroyed both ships. all in the span of 0.003 seconds. The second round struck a battleship at an angle, transferring kinetic energy through the hull in a shockwave that propagated faster than the ship's structural integrity could compensate for. The vessel simply came apart, breaking into three large sections and thousands of smaller fragments. The third, fourth, and fifth rounds found their targets with the same terrible precision. And then the rest of the human fleet opened fire. Sophia's first shot took out her target's port engine. Clean, surgical. The cruiser began to spin slowly, its crew probably scrambling to regain control, not understanding yet that they'd just been outclassed by a species they'd considered primitive. Her second shot destroyed a plasma cannon turret. Her third disabled the ship's sensor array. Around her, the rest of Alpha Squadron executed their attack patterns with the precision of a surgical team. No wasted shots, no overkill. Every round placed exactly where it needed to be to disable without destroying. Dr. Tanaka's voice came through the command channel. "Flight commanders, this is Tanaka. I'm seeing excellent at targeting discipline. Remember, every life we don't take today is a potential ally tomorrow." Sophia thought about Marcus, about the civilian transport that had been destroyed without warning, about revenge versus justice. "Copy that, Doctor," she said, continuing precision strikes. But even as she spoke, she selected a new target, a Draconis troop carrier, shields down, full of soldiers who had probably celebrated the thought of conquering Earth. Her finger hovered over the trigger. She could kill them all. Right now. One shot. Thousands of Draconis dead. Revenge for Marcus. For every human who had ever feared the darkness between stars. "Alpha 1, you're drifting off target," Dr. Tanaka's voice cut through her thoughts. "Are you experiencing technical difficulties?" Sophia closed her eyes, took a breath. "Negative, Doctor. Just recalibrating." She shifted her aim, targeted the carrier's engine instead of its crew compartment. Fired. The ship went dark, drifting, helpless, alive. "Good shooting, Alpha 1, Tanaka said quietly. And Sophia thought she heard understanding in that voice. Understanding of what it cost to choose precision over revenge. Jaren watched on the tactical display as invisible death carved through the Draconis formation. His instruments could barely track the projectiles. They were too small, too fast, too dark against the void. But he could track their effects. Ships exploding, not in the slow cinematic blooms of conventional warfare, but in sudden, violent disintegrations as kinetic energy overwhelmed every safety system simultaneously. Ships breaking apart, hulls splitting along stress fractures as mass driver rounds punched through critical support structures. Ships going dark, reactors failing as penetrating rounds severed power conduits and coolant systems. But most ships, Jaren realized with growing amazement, most ships were being disabled, not destroyed, shot with such precision that weapons and engines failed while life support remained intact. In the first 30 seconds of human response fire, the Draconis lost 14 ships, but only 14 out of 300. The humans were holding back. "Get me closer," Jaren said suddenly. "I need to see this." "Ambassador, we're already at the edge of safe observation distance. If we move any closer..." "Now, Lieutenant," Harmony's light adjusted position, edging closer to the engagement zone. Close enough that Jaren could see the battle not just as tactical icons, but as actual visual phenomena. Close enough to witness war as it was meant to be witnessed. As spectacle, as horror, as lesson. The human ships moved through space with a coordination that defied explanation. Every vessel knew exactly where every other vessel was, where it would be, where it needed to be. They flowed around Draconis fire like water around stones, never staying in one position long enough to present a stable target. But it wasn't random evasion. Jaren could see the pattern now. Every movement served a purpose. Every turn brought weapons to bear on a new target. Every acceleration put them in position to protect damaged vessels or exploit enemy vulnerabilities. They fought like a single organism with 37 bodies, like a school of fish moving as one, like something that had practiced this dance a million times until every step was instinctive. The Draconis fought like warriors. The humans fought like mathematics made flesh. "Ambassador," Mikra called out, her voice tight with stress, "the Draconis are attempting Formation 7 Gamma, pincer envelopment with reserves held back for..." "The humans already know," Jaren interrupted. He could see it on the display. The human fleet was adjusting before the Draconis maneuver was even half complete, shifting to counter a tactic that hadn't finished deploying yet. How, Pershing asked. How could they possibly know what the Draconis will do before? Because they've studied this, Jaren said quietly. 218 years of recorded Draconis battles. Every tactic, every formation, every command decision. They know how Draconis commanders think, how they react under pressure, how they attempt to recover from setbacks. He gestured at the display where the human fleet was now exploiting gaps in the Draconis formation that wouldn't exist for another 10 seconds. They're not predicting. They're not guessing. They know, the same way you know how a story ends after you've read it a dozen times. Another wave of kinetic fire lashed out from the human fleet. More Draconis ships died, their hulls penetrated by projectiles moving too fast for point defense systems to track. Zalthor's voice came through the comm again, and this time there was no arrogance. Only fear barely controlled. All vessels evasive pattern Delta 4. Break formation and scatter. Repeat, break formation and... The transmission cut off as Zalthor's flagship took a direct hit. Not a killing blow the massive vessel's armor held, but enough to disrupt communications and knock out primary sensors. Without their command ship coordinating movements, the Draconis fleet began to fall apart. Individual captains made independent decisions. Some tried to close distance, believing the humans must be weaker at close range. Others attempted to retreat, hoping to regroup beyond effective weapons range. All of them were wrong. The humans shifted tactics seamlessly. Ships that had been maintaining long-range bombardment suddenly accelerated forward to engage the vessels attempting to close. Ships that had been providing suppressive fire broke off to pursue retreating elements. Every decision was correct. Every movement optimal. Every shot counted. Sophia watched a Draconis heavy cruiser try to ram one of the human cargo vessels, the flagship she realized where Commander Harlow was coordinating the battle. A desperation tactic born of 300 years of relying on superior mass and armor. "Harlow, you've got incoming," she called out. "Draconis Cruiser Vector 273 trying to ram." "Acknowledged Alpha 1. Harlow's voice came back calm as ever. "Can you give me a solution?" Sophia ran the calculations. The cruiser was moving fast but predictably. Its trajectory was locked in by momentum and the need to keep its bow armor facing forward. "Fire 3 rounds," she said, targeting their bow plates, sequential detonation. Pattern Echo 7. "Copy. Firing." 3 kinetic rounds struck the cruiser's bow in rapid succession. Each impact precisely calculated to destabilize the ship's trajectory without destroying it. The massive vessel tumbled past Harlow's flagship, harmlessly spinning out of control, its bridge crew probably dead from the acceleration forces alone. The human ship continued on its heading without slowing, without deviation, like nothing had happened. "Good shooting, Alpha 1, Harlow said. "Tanaka was right about you." Sophia felt something warm in her chest. Not quite pride, not quite satisfaction, just purpose. Marcus would have approved of that shot. Effective, controlled, no unnecessary death, she hoped. "Casualty count," Jaren said hoarsely. Micra consulted her displays. Draconis losses 78 ships, destroyed 34, disabled 18 with critical damage. Human losses. She paused, checking the data again, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. 8 ships with moderate damage. None destroyed. 26 minutes had passed since the first shot was fired. The Draconis Empire, which had conquered 50 worlds and never lost a battle in 300 years, was being systematically dismantled by a force 1/8 their size. On the tactical display, Jaren watched the remaining Draconis ships begin to cluster together, forming a defensive sphere. Standard retreat protocol. Consolidate forces, maintain overlapping fields of fire, withdraw in good order. The humans didn't give them the chance. 6 vessels broke from the main human fleet and accelerated toward the Draconis defensive formation at speeds that made Jaren's tactical computer flag them as errors. Nothing that size should be able to pull that kind of acceleration without the crew being liquefied by the G-forces. But the ships kept accelerating, kept closing, and then when they were less than 50 kilometers from the Draconis sphere, they fired. Not kinetic weapons this time. Something else. The detonations were small, precise. Jaren's sensors identified them as shaped nuclear charges, each one carefully calibrated to create a directional pulse of electromagnetic radiation. EMP weapons, designed to disable electronics without destroying the physical ship. The Draconis defensive sphere went dark. Every ship simultaneously. Shields failed, weapons offline. Life support running on emergency batteries. Dead in space. Not destroyed. Disabled. The human fleet surrounded the helpless Draconis vessels and simply waited. Jaren realized he had been holding his breath. He exhaled slowly, his hands gripping the armrests of his command chair so tightly his knuckles had turned pale blue. They could destroy them, he whispered. Right now. The Draconis can't fight back, can't defend themselves. One more volley and the fleet would be gone. Then why aren't they firing? Pershing asked. Jaren thought about Professor Sterling's words, about dismantling enemy capabilities piece by piece, about leaving civilian populations intact, about teaching lessons instead of seeking revenge, about Dr. Tanaka insisting on precision, about Sophia Reyes choosing to disable a troop carrier instead of destroying it. Because they don't need to kill them, he said. They just need to win. A transmission came through. Not Draconis this time. Human. The voice was male calm with the kind of professional precision that came from years of training. No emotion, no gloating, just facts delivered with absolute certainty. Draconis vessels, this is Commander Thrace Harlow of the Earth Defense Force. Your weapons are offline. Your shields are down. You are disabled and surrounded. You will surrender your command authorization codes immediately or we will begin selective hull breaches, starting with your command ship. You have 60 seconds to comply. Silence on the comm. Jaren counted heartbeats. His own, rapid and irregular. 30 seconds, 40. At 53 seconds, a new voice came through. Older, rougher, defeated. Admiral Zalthor. Earth vessel, we transmit codes now, please. No more. No more. Codes received and verified, Harlow replied in that same emotionless tone. Draconis fleet, you will remain in place. Medical assistance will be provided for your wounded. Any attempt to restart weapon systems will result in immediate destruction. Comply and you will be permitted to withdraw to your own space after suitable guarantees are arranged. The transmission ended. On Jaren's tactical display, the human fleet maintained their positions around the disabled Draconis vessels. Watching, waiting, in complete control. The battle was over. Sophia brought her fighter into formation with the rest of Alpha Squadron, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. She'd done it. They'd all done it. Defeated 300 Draconis warships with minimal casualties. For Marcus, for Earth, for every human who'd ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. All pilots, this is Harlow, the commander's voice came through. Excellent work. Return to your carriers for debriefing. And someone get Dr. Tanaka on the line. I want to personally thank her for those shield systems. Already here, Commander, Tanaka's voice replied. And I want casualty reports. How many Draconis dead? There was a pause. Then Harlow's voice, quieter now. Preliminary estimates suggest approximately 4,300 across all destroyed vessels. Another 2,000 wounded. Silence on the channel. Then Tanaka. 4,300. We killed 4,300 beings today. Her voice was hollow, empty. Sophia recognized that tone. The sound of someone realizing the true cost of their work. Dr. Harlow said gently, if not for your systems, we'd have lost this battle. Earth would have fallen. Humanity would have been enslaved or destroyed. Those 4,000 deaths saved 8 billion lives. I know, Tanaka replied. I know the mathematics. I know the necessity. I need a moment. The channel went quiet. Sophia understood. She'd killed people today too. Draconis soldiers who'd probably had families, friends, lives. She'd killed them to protect Earth, to avenge Marcus, to stop an empire built on conquest. It had been necessary. It had been just. It still felt like murder. Alpha 1, a new voice cut through her thoughts. Young, uncertain. This is Beta 7, first combat mission. I wanted to say thank you. For leading us, for showing us how to fight clean. Sophia swallowed hard. You did good, Beta 7. We all did. Now let's get home and make sure we remember why it mattered. As her fighter turned toward the carrier, Sophia looked back at the disbanded Draconis fleet. Hundreds of ships, thousands of beings, an empire that had never lost brought low by precision and preparation. Marcus, she thought, I hope you saw that. I hope it was enough. The return journey to the council station took 6 hours at maximum, faster than light speed. 6 hours during which Jaren reviewed the battle footage over and over, trying to find something he had missed. Some weakness in the human tactics. Some moment where luck, rather than skill, had decided the outcome. He found nothing. Every shot the humans had fired had hit exactly where it was supposed to. Every maneuver had been perfectly timed. Every decision had been optimal, given the information available. It was the most one-sided military engagement Jaren had ever witnessed, and it terrified him. Because if humanity could do this with 37 ships, what could they do with 100,000? What would they do when the Draconis Empire mobilized their full military might? The council chamber was nearly empty when he arrived. Only the permanent staff and a handful of representatives from species who maintained constant presence. Most of the delegates had returned to their homeworlds after the vote against intervention. Jaren didn't care. He requested emergency session protocols anyway. Sent priority notifications to every council member. Made it clear that what he had to report could not wait. They assembled slowly, reluctantly, annoyed at being summoned for what they assumed was an Altari overreaction to an inevitable Draconis victory. General Corvin arrived last, his scarred face unreadable. He took his seat in the crimson-marked Draconis section and fixed his yellow eyes on Jaren. Ambassador, he said formally, I trust you have not called us here to mourn the conquest of Earth. The Draconis Empire operates within established parameters. Your objections have been noted and— Earth has not fallen, Jaren interrupted. Silence crashed across the chamber like a physical force. Corvin leaned forward slowly. Explain. Jaren activated the holographic display. Battle footage began to play. The assembled representatives watched as 300 Draconis warships engaged 37 human vessels. Watched as plasma fire was absorbed and channeled harmlessly away. Watched as kinetic weapons moving at relativistic speeds carved through Draconis armor like paper. Watched as humanity dismantled the Empire's invasion fleet in less than half an hour. The recording played for 18 minutes. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. When it ended, the silence was absolute. Jaren looked up at the tiered seating at the representatives from 47 civilizations and saw his own shock reflected in every face, every optical sensor, every translation device. 78 Draconis vessels destroyed, he said quietly. 34 disabled beyond combat capability. The remainder retreated after Admiral Zalthor surrendered command authorization codes under duress. He paused, letting that sink in. Humanity suffered 8 ships damaged, 0 destroyed, 0 casualties. Counselor Vreth of the Trade Consortium was the first to find his voice, though it came out as a mechanical whisper through his translation device. This is impossible. The Draconis have never lost a fleet engagement. Not in 300 years of expansion. They lost this one, Jaren replied simply, and they will lose again if they continue this war. Continue, Corvin stood, his massive frame rigid with barely controlled fury. Ambassador, or you cannot possibly believe humanity would dare to. I don't believe, General, I know. Jaren activated another display. These are intercepted transmissions from Earth. Coded communications sent not toward the council station, but toward coordinates beyond Draconis-controlled space. The display showed trajectory lines, communication vectors, timestamps. The humans are not preparing to defend their homeworld against retaliation, Jaren continued. They are preparing to attack yours. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouting across the assembly. Translation devices overloading as dozens of species tried to voice their shock, their disbelief, their horror at what was being suggested. A primitive species, a civilization barely capable of interplanetary travel, planning to attack the Draconis Empire's homeworld. It was insanity. It was impossible. Jaren knew with absolute certainty exactly what humanity was going to do. But before anyone could respond, a new transmission came through. Not from Earth, from Draconis space. A priority military channel poorly encrypted in the chaos following the defeat. And what Jaren heard made his blood run cold. A young Draconis soldier, his voice shaking with confusion and doubt, speaking to someone off-channel. I don't understand, Vorn. We were told the humans were primitives. Weak, easy prey. But I watched our fleet, our entire fleet, destroyed by tactics we couldn't counter, by weapons we couldn't defend against, by beings who chose to disable rather than kill. A pause, then, what if we're wrong? What if the Empire has been wrong about everything? Jaren looked at Corbin, saw the general's face go pale beneath his red scales. Because that voice, that young soldier questioning everything, represented something more dangerous to the Draconis Empire than any weapon. Doubt. The recording cut off, but the damage was done. Somewhere in Draconis space, a young soldier named Dravik had just taken the first step toward defection, and the galaxy was about to learn that wars weren't won by ships and weapons alone. They were won in the hearts and mind of those willing to question what they'd been told. Jaren pressed his hand against the console and whispered a prayer. Let wisdom prevail. Let understanding triumph over pride. Let the lesson be learned before more must die. But he knew deep in his heart that the hardest lessons were the ones paid for in blood, and the Draconis Empire had only just begun to learn. 3 days after the battle, Jaren received a transmission that changed everything. It came through secure channels heavily encrypted, routed through the same Altari relay satellites that humanity had co-opted for their intelligence network. When his communications officer decoded it, the message was simple. Ambassador Jaren, we have a defector, Draconis Ground Forces junior officer. He's requesting asylum and offering intelligence. Can you facilitate contact with the Galactic Council, Director Ashford? Jaren stared at the message for a long time. A defector, a Draconis soldier willing to betray his empire. The first crack in a foundation built on 300 years of absolute loyalty. He thought about the intercepted transmission he'd heard. The young soldier questioning everything. Send my authorization codes to Director Ashford, he told his communications officer. And prepare a secure channel. I want to speak with this defector personally. The holographic connection took 3 hours to establish. When it finally stabilized, Jaren found himself looking at 2 figures seated in what appeared to be a human military briefing room. Director Ashford on one side, and on the other a young Draconis male who looked barely out of adolescence. His scales were lighter than most, suggesting youth. His eyes were uncertain, frightened but determined. Ambassador Jaren, Ashford said. This is Dravik. Until 4 days ago, he served as a combat engineer aboard a Draconis assault carrier. He surrendered to human forces after the battle and has been cooperating with our intelligence services. Jaren looked at the young Draconis. Why? Dravik flinched at the directness of the question. Then he straightened, finding his spine. Because I watched my commander send 300 ships against 37 and lose. Because I saw humans disable our fleet when they could have destroyed it. Because I was taught that strength means conquest, but humans showed me that strength means restraint. His clawed hands clenched. And because 3 months ago I was part of the crew that tested a probe in this sector. We detected a civilian vessel. Our commander ordered us to fire on it to test our weapon systems. I was the one who calibrated the targeting solution. Jaren saw the anguish in Dravik's eyes, saw the weight of guilt. The vessel was destroyed. Dravik continued, his voice barely a whisper. All aboard killed. I didn't know their names, didn't know their species. They were just targets, just data. He looked at Ashford. Then I learned. One of the dead was Marcus Reyes, human, 28 years old, an engineer traveling to the mining colonies. He had a sister, Lieutenant Sophia Reyes, fighter pilot in the Earth Defense Force. Dravik's voice broke. I killed her brother, and when her squadron had me surrounded, disabled, and helpless, she chose to disable my ship instead of destroying it. She could have killed me, should have killed me, but she chose mercy. Jaren felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just military intelligence. This was conscience. This was a young soldier confronting the reality of what his empire had made him do. What do you want, Dravik? He asked quietly. To help, the young Draconis replied. The Empire is mobilizing everything we have. 847 warships. My people are being told that humans are monsters, that we must crush them before they threaten the entire galaxy. He leaned forward. but I've seen the truth. I've seen how humans fight. I've seen how they choose. And I know that if the Empire attacks Earth again, thousands more will die on both sides. I can help prevent that. Ashford spoke up. Drevik has provided us with complete schematics of Draconis Prime's planetary defense grid, communication protocols, military deployment schedules. He's offering to help us end this war with minimal bloodshed. By betraying your own people, Jaren asked Drevik. The young Draconis met his gaze. By saving them from themselves. The Empire has been wrong for 300 years. Someone has to be brave enough to admit it. Jaren made his decision. I'll facilitate your asylum request with the Council. But Drevik, you need to understand what you're offering. If humanity uses your intelligence to attack Draconis Prime, your people will consider you a traitor. Your name will be erased from history. Your family will suffer. I know, Drevik said quietly, but if it saves lives, both human and Draconis, then it's worth it. Jaren looked at this young soldier who had found the courage to choose right over easy conscience over loyalty. And he thought this is how wars truly end. Not with weapons, with hearts willing to change. 1 week later, Jaren requested asylum aboard a human vessel. The request came through official diplomatic channels carefully worded to avoid suggesting the Altari Federation supported humanity's actions. Personal interest in observing conflict resolution. Academic study of military tactics. Neutral documentation for historical record. The truth was simpler. Jaren needed to see this through to the end. Director Ashford approved the request within 6 hours. Harmony's Light received coordinates for a rendezvous point 3 days travel from Draconis Prime. No conditions, no demands, just coordinates and a message. You tried to save them, Ambassador. Now help us remember what we're saving them from. When Jaren's ship arrived at the designated location, he found himself staring at something his sensors could barely comprehend. 20 human vessels hung in the void. Not 200, not the fleet that had defended Earth. 20 ships that looked nothing like the converted cargo haulers that had destroyed the Draconis invasion force. These were purpose-built warships, sleek, predatory. Their hulls absorbed light rather than reflecting it, making them appear as voids against the stars. No obvious weapon ports, no visible shield emitters, just smooth, dark surfaces that suggested violence contained rather than displayed. Lieutenant Micra ran every scan her instruments could perform. When she looked up from her console, her eye stalks were contracted in confusion. Ambassador, I can't get accurate mass readings. The ships are using some kind of gravitic distortion field that's interfering with our sensors. But based on displacement calculations, each of those vessels masses at least 40% more than they should for their size. Armor? Jaren asked. If so, it's armor unlike anything in our database. The density readings don't match any known alloy. A transmission came through. Text only. Ambassador Jaren, please transfer to the vessel designated Haven 7. A shuttle will arrive at your coordinates in 14 minutes. You may bring 2 staff members. All recording equipment is permitted. We also have a guest who wishes to speak with you. The shuttle that arrived was small, utilitarian, and completely automated. No pilot, no crew, just empty seats and a navigation system that guided them smoothly across the distance between Harmony's Light and the human warship. Jaren brought Mikra and Persian, his sensor officer and tactical analyst. If they were going to witness what came next, they needed to document it properly. The shuttle docked with Haven 7 without even a tremor of contact. Pressure equalized. The airlock opened. Commander Thrace Harlow waited on the other side. He was exactly as Jaren had imagined from hearing his voice during the first battle. 35 years old, medium height for a human, dark hair cut military short, eyes that were the color of Earth's oceans and just as deep. He wore a simple gray uniform with minimal insignia, and he carried himself with the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly what he was capable of. Ambassador Jaren, Harlow said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Thank you for joining us. I know this wasn't an easy decision. Jaren took the offered hand. The grip was firm, professional, neither aggressive nor deferential, just certain. Commander Harlow, thank you for permitting my presence. I hope you understand that I am here as an observer only. The Altari Federation cannot officially support. You're here because you need to see, Harlow interrupted gently. Because someone needs to witness what happens next and explain to the galaxy why it had to happen this way. We understand, Ambassador. Come, Director Ashford is waiting, and someone else wants to meet you. They walked through corridors that felt more like research facilities than warships. Clean, efficient. Crew members moved with purpose, speaking in low tones, working at stations that Jaren's eyes couldn't quite parse. The technology was just different enough from Galactic standard that his mind kept trying to find familiar reference points and failing. They entered a briefing room. Director Ashford stood near a holographic display, and beside her, wearing an ill-fitting human uniform, was Dravik. The young Draconis straightened when he saw Jaren. Ambassador, I wanted to thank you personally for facilitating my asylum request. The council granted it this morning. Jaren studied him. How are you adjusting? Human food is different, Dravik said with a slight smile. But the people here treat me with more respect than my own commanders ever did. They ask my opinion. They listen when I speak. They see me as a person, not just a soldier to be spent. Ashford gestured to chairs around a conference table. Please, sit. We have approximately 6 hours before we reach Draconis Prime. I'd like to show you what we're going to do there, and more importantly, what we're not going to do. Jaren sat. Mikra and Persian took positions near the walls, already recording everything. Ashford activated a holographic display. Draconis Prime appeared, rotating slowly. A world of red deserts and dark oceans. Billions of inhabitants, the heart of an empire that had conquered 50 worlds. Intelligence estimates suggest the Draconis have assembled 847 warships in defensive orbit, Ashford said calmly. Their planetary defense grid includes 416 orbital weapons platforms. Ground-based missile installations number over 2,000. Shield generators protect every major population center. She zoomed in on the planet's capital city. Vast, sprawling. Millions of lives concentrated in towers that reach toward the sky. If we wanted to destroy Draconis Prime, we could. Our payload includes 12 planet cracker impactors, 85,000-ton tungsten cores accelerated to 18% of light speed. Each impact would release approximately 2.4 times 10 to the 24th power joules. That's enough energy to crack a continental plate. 12 strikes could render this world uninhabitable for 10,000 years. Jaren felt his heart skip. Micra made a small sound of horror. Ashford looked at Jaren directly. We won't be using them. Then why bring them? Jaren asked quietly. Because we needed to have the choice. Because the Draconis Empire respects only strength, and we needed to demonstrate that we possess overwhelming force. But more importantly, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Because we needed to prove to ourselves that we could build weapons capable of genocide and then choose not to use them. That's the test, Ambassador. Any species can destroy. The question is, can you choose restraint when you have the power to annihilate? Dravik spoke up. Director Ashford asked me to review the attack plan, to look for ways to minimize Draconis casualties while achieving the objective. I've provided targeting data for every military installation on the planet, locations where strikes will disable infrastructure without harming civilian populations. He met Jaren's eyes. I'm helping humans invade my homeworld, but I'm doing it to save my people from a war they cannot win. Is that treason? Or is it the most loyal thing I could do? Jaren had no answer. Harlow stepped forward, adding his own holographic display to Ashford's. This one showed the attack plan in detail. 20 ships, he said, not because that's all we have, because that's all we need. Our objective isn't destruction, it's demonstration. We will disable the Draconis fleet, neutralize their planetary defenses, and occupy strategic locations in their capital. We will do this with minimal casualties on both sides. His ocean-colored eyes met Jaren's. And we will do it in a way that shows every species in the galaxy that humanity doesn't want to rule. We want to make sure no one else can rule us. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Draconis system, exactly on schedule. Jaren watched from Haven 7's observation deck as the tactical displays updated with real-time information. The Draconis defensive formation was impressive. 847 warships arranged in concentric spheres around their homeworld. Overlapping fields of fire, mutual support positions, every lesson learned from 3 centuries of conquest applied to defense. It should have been impregnable. But Jaren had learned not to underestimate human preparation. A transmission cut through the void. Emperor Vrakos himself, his ancient voice carrying the weight of 60 years of absolute rule. Human vessels. You have entered Draconis sovereign space with hostile intent. You have already committed acts of war against the Empire. Turn back now and your deaths will be quick. Advance further and we will reduce your homeworld to ash. Harlow didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked to the communication station and opened a channel. When he spoke, his voice was calm, professional, devoid of emotion. Emperor Vrakos, I am Commander Thrace Harlow of the Earth Defense Force. We are here to accept your surrender. Your invasion fleet at Earth was destroyed. Your command authorization codes are in our possession. Your entire tactical database has been compromised. Surrender now and your people will be treated with dignity under the established rules of war. Silence on the other end. Then Vrakos laughed. It was a terrible sound. Old, bitter, certain of its own power. You dare speak of our surrender. We are Draconis. We have conquered 50 worlds. We have never lost. Never yielded, never. You lost at Earth, Harlow interrupted quietly. 78 ships destroyed, 34 disabled. Command codes surrendered under duress. That is defeat, Emperor. The only question now is how many more must die before you acknowledge it. The transmission cut off. On the tactical display, the Draconis fleet began to move. Not retreating, advancing, all 847 ships accelerating toward the human fleet like an avalanche of metal and fire. Harlow turned to his tactical officer. Execute Plan Sigma 7. Precision strikes only. Target weapons and propulsion. No reactor hits unless absolutely necessary. Then he looked at Dravik. You're sure about this? The young Draconis nodded. The codes I provided are current. When you transmit them, every weapons platform in orbit will recognize you as friendly forces. They'll stand down. And if you're wrong, Harlow asked. Dravik met his gaze. Then I'll have failed both my people and yours, but I'm not wrong. I checked the protocols myself before I left. Then let's end this war, Harlow said. The human fleet dispersed, not scattering in panic, separating into predetermined positions with mathematical precision. Each ship exactly where it needed to be for what came next. The Draconis opened fire first. Plasma cannons, energy torpedoes, particle beams, everything they had unleashed in a coordinated barrage designed to overwhelm any defense through sheer volume of fire. The human ships disappeared. Jaren had seen this before. Stealth technology so advanced it bordered on the miraculous. But this time he understood the strategy. The humans weren't running. They were positioning. For exactly 43 seconds, the Draconis fleet fired blindly into empty space, wasting energy and ammunition, while revealing their exact positions with every discharge. Then Harlow gave the order. Transmit the codes. A single encrypted burst. Dravik's access codes validated by Draconis Prime's own security systems. Every orbital weapons platform shut down simultaneously. The Draconis fleet was still trying to process what had happened when the human ships struck back. They didn't decloak completely, just long enough to fire. Appeared for microseconds, launched kinetic impactors, disappeared again. Ghost ships delivering precision death from impossible angles. But as at Earth, the attacks were surgical. Weapon systems, propulsion units, sensor arrays, everything designed to disable without destroying. Within 40 minutes, the Draconis fleet was combat ineffective. 847 ships reduced to floating debris fields or powered-down hulks. Total Draconis casualties, 4,312 dead. Total human casualties, 0. Jaren watched it happen and felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of warfare. This wasn't battle. This was surgery. Precise, controlled, designed to remove capability without destroying the patient. But the real test came next. 20 human ships descended toward Draconis Prime, each one heading toward a different target. As they entered the atmosphere, they became visible for the first time. Jaren watched through external cameras as Haven 7 plunged through clouds the color of dried blood. Watched as the capital city appeared below. Towers reaching toward the sky. Streets filled with millions of Draconis going about their lives, unaware that their world had just changed forever. The ships didn't bombard the city, didn't fire on population centers, didn't destroy infrastructure. They landed in parks, in plazas, in open spaces carefully calculated to minimize collateral damage. But one ship landed on the outskirts of the capital near military barracks, and from that ship emerged a strike team. Leading them was a young woman with dark hair and fierce eyes, Lieutenant Sophia Reyes. She had volunteered for the ground assault, had insisted on being part of the team that would secure the military installations, because she needed to see this through, needed to face what war really meant up close, not from the safety of a fighter cockpit, and because she knew that somewhere in this city was the soldier who had killed her brother. The strike team moved through the streets with practiced efficiency. Citizens scattered before them, frightened but unharmed. The humans fired only when fired upon, and even then they used weapons calibrated to stun rather than kill. They reached the military barracks without significant resistance. Most Draconis soldiers were still reeling from the orbital defeat, struggling to understand how their impregnable defense had failed. The humans breached the doors and moved inside. And that's when Sophia saw him. A young Draconis, light scales, frightened eyes, standing in the corridor with his hands raised, no weapon in sight. Not Dravik, but one of his squad mates, another junior engineer who had been aboard that assault carrier, another soldier who had helped calibrate the weapons that killed Marcus. Sophia's finger tightened on the trigger. "Wait," a voice called out. Dravik stepped out from behind the human strike team. He'd insisted on coming groundside, on being there to help translate, to help his former comrades understand that this didn't have to end in blood. Vornter Dravik said quietly to the young soldier, "It's over. The fleet is disabled. The orbital platforms are offline. Resistance will only get people killed." Vorn stared at Dravik. You betrayed us. You gave them our codes. You helped them invade our homeworld. "I helped them end a war we couldn't win," Dravik replied. "I helped them do it without destroying our people. Vorn, we killed a human civilian 3 months ago just to test our weapons. We didn't even think about it." He gestured to Sophia. "This is Lieutenant Reyes. The brother we killed was hers. She has every right to hate us, every right to seek revenge. But she's standing here with her weapon lowered because she chooses to be better than what we were." Sophia looked at this young Draconis, this soldier who had helped murder Marcus, this being who was barely more than a child himself. She could kill him right now. Justice for Marcus, revenge for every moment of grief she'd carried since that terrible day. Her finger stayed on the trigger. "Sophia," Dr. Tanaka's voice came through her calm. "Remember what we're here to do. Remember why we're better than them." Sophia closed her eyes, took a breath, thought about Marcus, about his kindness, his belief that people could be better than their worst moments. She lowered her weapon. "Your friend is right," she said to Vorn, her voice hard but controlled. "The war is over. You can surrender now or you can die defending an empire that was wrong for 300 years. Choose." Vorn looked at Dravik, at Sophia, at the human soldiers who could have killed every Draconis in this building but had chosen restraint instead. He dropped to his knees and placed his hands behind his head. "I surrender." Within 2 hours, every major military installation in the capital had been secured, not through destruction, through precision, through the kind of surgical military action that required more discipline, more training, more courage than simple, overwhelming force ever could. The human strike team that entered the Imperial Palace consisted of 12 soldiers: Commander Harlow, Dr. Tanaka, Sophia Reyes, Dravik, and 8 others whose names would be recorded in the history of 2 civilizations. They encountered resistance, palace guards, elite soldiers sworn to protect their emperor. The humans didn't kill them, didn't even wound them, just disabled them with weapons that delivered electromagnetic pulses calibrated to disrupt Draconis nervous systems without causing permanent damage. The guards fell unconscious, unharmed. They would wake in several hours with headaches and wounded pride, but nothing more. Jaren followed the strike team, his recording equipment capturing everything. This was what the galaxy needed to see, not just the victory, the restraint. The throne room doors were massive, 3 meters thick, reinforced steel designed to withstand orbital bombardment. The humans placed shaped charges, small, precise, calculated to cut through the locking mechanisms without damaging the doors themselves or harming anyone on the other side. The doors swung open. Emperor Vrakas sat on his throne surrounded by his personal guard. The ancient Draconis looked exactly as Jaren had seen in countless diplomatic recordings. Massive, scarred, his dark red scales bearing the marks of 100 battles, his yellow eyes burning with fury and pride. But now, for the first time in 60 years of rule, there was something else in those eyes. Fear. Commander Harlow walked into the throne room like he owned it, calm, unhurried. Director Ashford followed via holographic projection from orbit on, her white hair and simple gray uniform, a stark contrast to the ornate violence of Draconis architecture. Jaren came next, staying near the entrance, his recording equipment documenting everything. And then came Sophia and Dravik, side by side, human and Draconis, victim and perpetrator, standing together. "You dare," Vrakos roared, his voice echoing off stone walls. "You dare enter my palace. You dare stand before the Emperor of Draconis." "Your fleet is disabled," Harlow said flatly. "Your orbital defenses are offline. Your palace guards are unconscious but unharmed. Your empire is over. These are facts, Emperor. You may accept them or deny them, but they remain facts." Vrakos stood from his throne, towering over the humans. His claws scraped against the armrests, leaving gouges in the ancient stone. "I would rather see my world burn than surrender to primitives." Ashford's hologram stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried clearly through the vast chamber. "That can be arranged." She gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the throne room. It showed a ship in high orbit, a single vessel holding position above the capital city, and beneath that vessel, a weapon was armed. The display zoomed in, showing details in horrifying clarity. The Planet Cracker Impactor, 85,000 tons of tungsten carbide, acceleration rails charging, targeting computers locked on coordinates that would place the impact directly beneath where they stood. Numbers scrolled across the display. Impact velocity 18% of light speed. Kinetic energy release 2.4 times 10 to the 24th power joules. Predicted crater diameter 400 kilometers. Estimated casualties everything within 600 kilometers of ground zero. The entire capital, 40 million Draconis, gone in an instant. Vrakos stared at the display. For the first time in his long life, he was seeing his own mortality projected in precise mathematical terms. "You would destroy an entire city," he whispered. "No," Ashford replied. "But we could. That's the point you seem to be missing, Emperor. We possess overwhelming force. We have the capability to reduce your world to ash, to end your empire in a day, to become everything you feared we might be." She paused, letting that sink in. "And we choose not to." Harlow stepped forward, pulling up additional displays. These showed human medical teams treating Draconis wounded in orbit, human engineers already working to restore power to disabled ships, human translators coordinating with Draconis civilians to provide humanitarian assistance. "We're not here to destroy you," Harlow said. "We're here to teach you a lesson your empire has spent 3 centuries avoiding. The lesson that conquest creates only enemies. That power without restraint creates only fear. That strength means knowing when not to strike." Then Sophia stepped forward, young, small compared to the Draconis Emperor, but standing tall. "3 months ago, your forces killed my brother, Marcus Reyes. He was 28 years old, an engineer. He was traveling to the mining colonies to help build infrastructure. He never hurt anyone, never threatened anyone. But your empire killed him to test a weapon." Her voice was steady, but Jaren could hear the pain beneath it. "I had every right to seek revenge, every right to demand blood for blood. But I'm standing here because my species has learned something yours never did. That vengeance creates cycles. That killing creates more killing. That the only way to end war is to choose something better." She looked directly at Vrakos. "I choose to be better than my grief, better than my rage. I choose to let you live so you can learn what we've learned. That true strength isn't the power to destroy. It's the wisdom to choose mercy." Jaren watched Vrakos's face, saw the Emperor's certainty crumbling, saw 60 years of absolute rule confronting the possibility that everything had been built on a foundation of sand. "What do you want?" Vrakos asked finally, his voice hoarse. Ashford pulled up a document. Terms of surrender written in clear, precise language. Complete withdrawal from all conquered worlds within 1 standard year. reparations paid to freed populations, military forces reduced to defensive levels only, human observers granted access to ensure compliance, and most importantly, she looked at Vrakos directly. Education. Your military academies will be reformed. Your young will be taught that strength serves justice, not ambition. That power creates responsibility, not entitlement. You will learn to be strong without being cruel. Vrakos stared at the terms, his claws tightened on the throne. And if we refuse, Harlow's voice was cold, then we destroy your fleet, dismantle your infrastructure, reduce your empire to scattered worlds with no capacity to threaten anyone. And we do it while ensuring your civilian population survives so that future generations can rebuild and perhaps learn the lessons you refuse to accept. Silence filled the throne room. Then from behind the throne, a familiar voice spoke. General Korvan emerged from the shadows. The old warrior looked exhausted, defeated, but determined. My emperor, he said quietly, I have seen what these humans can do. I have watched them destroy our fleets with precision we cannot match. I have witnessed their restraint when they could have shown none. They offer us survival with dignity. I suggest we accept. Vrakos turned to his general, his oldest friend, his most trusted advisor. You would have me surrender after 60 years of rule, after 300 years of Draconis expansion. I would have you survive, Korvan replied. I would have our people live to see another generation. I would have us learn from defeat rather than die in pride. He gestured to Dravik. Even our young see the truth now. Even those we trained to conquest have found the courage to choose differently. Perhaps it is time we listen to them. The emperor looked at his general, at the human standing calmly in his throne room, at the holographic display showing the weapon that could end everything, at Sophia Reyes, who had lost a brother but chose mercy anyway, at Dravik, who had betrayed his empire to save it, and he made his choice. I accept your terms. The words came out broken, painful, but they came. The formal surrender was signed 2 hours later in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. Every species with Ansible communication capability watched as Emperor Vrakos placed his seal on documents that ended 300 years of Draconis expansion. Watched as human and Draconis officers shook hands. Watched as Sophia Reyes and Drabi stood together, proof that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal. Watched as the galaxy's balance of power shifted forever. Jaren stood in the palace courtyard afterward, looking up at the sky where human and Draconis ships now flew in coordinated patterns. Not as enemies, as something new, something the galaxy hadn't seen in a long time. Partners in peace enforced by demonstrated strength. Director Ashford found him there. Not holographically this time. In person. She had come planet-side to witness the final moment. Ambassador Jaren, she said quietly, thank you for bearing witness. Thank you for trying to save lives even when no one would listen. The galaxy needs voices like yours. I failed, Jaren said. Thousands died because I couldn't convince the council to intervene. You didn't fail. You warned them. You gave them every chance to choose peace. They chose bureaucracy instead. That's not on you, Ambassador. That's on them. She stood beside him, looking up at the same sky. What happens now? Jaren asked. Now we help them rebuild. We teach them better ways. We show them that the strongest civilizations are the ones that choose cooperation over conquest. Ashford smiled slightly. And we wait. For what? For the next species that needs to learn this lesson. Because there will always be another empire, another conqueror, another civilization that mistakes might for right. She turned to face him. The galaxy needs teachers, Ambassador. Not rulers, not conquerors. Teachers. That's what humanity chooses to be. 4 months later, Jaren stood before the Galactic Council one final time. The assembly chamber was packed. Every species, every delegation. Everyone wanted to hear what he had to say about humanity, about the war, about what it all meant. Jaren activated the holographic display, and images filled the space above the speaker's platform. Not battle footage this time. Reconstruction. Human engineers working alongside Draconis to restore damaged infrastructure. Human teachers in Draconis military academies showing young soldiers how to defend rather than conquer. Human medical personnel providing care to populations on freed worlds. And in one image, Sophia Reyes and Dravik working together to coordinate relief efforts for refugees from the conquered worlds. Honored representatives, Jaren began, 4 months ago I warned this council about humanity. I said they were dangerous. I was correct, but I misunderstood the nature of that danger. He paused, looking up at the tiered seating. Humanity is dangerous because they have mastered war so completely that they understand its futility. Because they have studied violin so thoroughly that they comprehend the true cost of peace. Because they spent 218 years preparing for a conflict they hoped would never come. More images, the freed worlds, populations returning home, resources being returned to their rightful owners, Draconis soldiers learning new ways of thinking about strength and power. The Draconis Empire conquered 50 worlds through force. Humanity freed those worlds through precision. The Draconis ruled through fear. Humanity teaches through example. The Draconis sought to expand their territory. Humanity seeks to expand cooperation. He activated one final image. Earth, blue and green and white. Beautiful. Home to 8 billion beings who had chosen restraint over revenge. I stand before you today to present humanity for formal recognition as a council member species. Not because of their military might, though they have proven that beyond question. Not because of their technology, though it rivals or exceeds our own. Jaren looked directly at the assembly, but because they possess something the galaxy desperately needs. Wisdom. The wisdom to know that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the choice not to. That real power comes from restraint. That lasting peace is built not on conquest, but on cooperation. The vote was unanimous. 47 species stood in recognition as Earth became the 48th member of the Galactic Council. 3 days later, Jaren stood on the observation deck of Harmony's Light, watching stars turn slowly in the eternal void. Beside him, Director Ashford appeared via a holographic projection, her form slightly translucent, but her presence solid. Ambassador, she said, congratulations on humanity's acceptance to the Council. Though I suspect we have you to thank for that as much as our own actions. You earned it, Jaren replied. Every species that voted yes did so because they saw what you did, how you did it, what you chose not to do. 218 years of preparation, Ashford mused. 8 generations of humans, each one teaching the next watch, learn, prepare. Each one trusting that if the day came, we'd make the right choice. And you did? We did, Ashford smiled, because we learned from you, Ambassador, from the Altari, from your mistake. Jaren looked at her confused. When the Draconis first contacted your people 50 years ago, you welcomed them openly, showed them your technology, your culture, your defenses. Within 5 years, they had conquered 2 of your colonies because they understood exactly how you thought. She met his eyes. You taught us the most valuable lesson of all, patience, observation, understanding your enemy before they understand you. The Altari gave up too quickly. We learned to never give up at all. Jaren felt something release in his chest, a weight he'd been carrying for half a century. Thank you, he said quietly. No, Ambassador. Thank you for trying to save us, for bearing witness, for helping the galaxy understand what we were trying to teach. The holographic projection began to fade. The age of conquest is over, Ashford said, as her image dissolved. The age of cooperation begins, and humanity will be there to ensure it stays that way. She disappeared. Jaren stood alone on the observation deck, watching the stars, thinking about everything that had happened, about Velcor burning, about Draconis pride, about human patience, about Sophia Reyes, who chose mercy over vengeance, about Dravik, who chose conscience over loyalty, about lessons taught and lessons learned, about a galaxy that had just discovered that the strongest species wasn't the one that had never lost. It was the one that had spent 2 centuries learning how to win, and then choosing mercy instead. Outside the viewport, a mixed patrol ship passed by human and Draconis crew working together. Escort duty for transports returning freed populations to their homeworlds. Former enemies working together. Building something new, something better. Jaren pressed his hand against the cold viewport and smiled. The galaxy had changed, and for the first time in 30 years he felt hope. The observation deck fell silent as the patrol ship disappeared into the distance. Its mission of peace carried out with the same precision as its mission of war had been. Jaren closed his eyes and thought about Professor Sterling's words from so long ago. We'd follow them home, dismantle their capacity to threaten us, then help them rebuild. They had done exactly that. And in doing so, they had taught the galaxy what true strength looked like. Not the strength to destroy, the strength to choose not to, the strength to be better than your enemies, the strength to turn conquest into cooperation. That was humanity's gift to the stars, and Jaren had been privileged to witness it. He opened his eyes, looked out at the galaxy, and whispered a prayer his people had spoken for 1,000 years. May wisdom guide the strong. May strength protect the weak. May peace prevail among the stars. For the first time in his life, he believed those words might actually come true. Because humanity had shown the galaxy a different way, a better way, the way forward, and the stars would never be the same.